We are back on the record. I am Cody Thomas breaking down key moments from week 4 of the Karen Read murder retrial. Let's get right into it.
The death of John O'Keefe was tragic. A brave officer raising 2 children as a single parent. Now, his girlfriend Karen Read has been charged with his murder, and the case has been clouded by controversy surrounding surveillance videos from the night John died and the investigation which followed. Some videos don't exist, some have gaps in time, and others are just not 100% clear. In a case where each side has a completely different version of how John O'Keefe died, evidence from videos should help the jury find the truth. During the first trial, the jury was divided and could not agree about what happened. But now, second time around, both sides are hoping their side's interpretation of these videos will persuade the jury. Meanwhile, the public waits as the evidence unfolds inside the courtroom.
Massachusetts State Police Sergeant Yuri Buchanan remained at the center of testimony this week. Defense attorney Alan Jackson pressed him about an early theory involving a cocktail glass, Read's "I hit him" comment, and the timeline of when the taillight fragments were found. Jurors also heard about flirtatious texts between Read and ATF agent Brian Higgins, messages the defense says speak to her mindset and the state says point to motive. Surveillance footage showed Higgins at Canton PD in the early morning after O'Keefe's death. The defense suggested Higgins may have had a reason to confront O'Keefe. Lastly, the topic of Brian Albert's dog Chloe came up, fueling speculation after the German Shepherd was rehomed following the incident.
Can you describe for the jurors exactly where each of the, let's take them one at a time, where each of the 6 pieces of plastic fragments were found?
All items recovered that day were found in the general vicinity where the other items were also located.
You weren't there, correct?
I was there recovering the evidence, yes.
You weren't there at the time of the incident?
No, of course not.
Well, you'll agree that words matter, right? I mean, you're testifying, so words do matter.
Words do matter. That's, that's important.
So working off of your, as you put it, your theory, you theorized that there was an impact spot at 34 Fairview, correct?
Based on the statement I hit him, I assumed that Mr. O'Keefe was impacted with something. A theory would be, why is the cocktail glass broken? Because it came into contact with the victim. So that's why my information communicated to the ME's office was a possible domestic involving a glass strike to the victim.
Did that refresh your recollection as to when the items were booked at the crime lab?
According to this document, yes, there were items booked at the crime lab prior to March 14th. In particular, to answer your question, completeness here, particular, that one item does indicate that the first time the lab received it for processing was March 14th.
Who submitted all of that evidence to the crime lab?
Michael Proctor.
You're also aware that Michael Proctor eventually submitted a total of some 46 or so pieces of taillight material that was claimed to have been recovered at 34 Fairview on since January 29th, 2022, correct?
I don't know the total pieces, but we didn't claim to recover it there. We recovered it there.
You did learn that Brian Higgins, on January 29th, January 28th, going into January 29th, 2022, had what could be generally referred to as a romantic interest in Ms. Read?
Objection. Sustained.
Would you describe the text messages between Brian Higgins and Karen Read that he presented to you as flirtatious in nature?
Without having recently reviewed them in detail, I don't want to label it something without having complete understanding of the content. Are you breaking up? or staying together. I don't know. He hooked up with another girl on vacation. I am very close to his niece. It is a very up situation. Have you always had trouble accepting compliments? Yeesh. No. It at all. All yours came to me after a day of drinking. You were way more all over me that day. So what? Don't most compliments come that way? Coming to your house would have been bad for the both of us. For starters, you wouldn't have wanted me to leave. Now equals not. That sounds good. That's trouble.
Would you consider those text messages, as you reviewed them when you received them from Brian Higgins, as being flirtatious or romantic in nature?
I would not categorize them to that extent. The totality of, to put a label on the whole thing, my opinion is that she's trying to get revenge.
Get revenge?
Yes, get revenge.
On John?
Yeah.
For what happened on New Year's Eve?
Yes.
Day 14 featured more testimony from Sergeant Buchanan and key surveillance footage. Jurors saw Karen Reed and ATF agent Brian Higgins arrive at the Canton Police Department just hours after O'Keefe's death. Higgins stayed for 6 minutes and left with what looked like a phone. Prosecutors asked if Higgins had motive. Buchanan said no. The defense pointed to text messages with Reed suggesting a possible confrontation with O'Keefe. But Buchanan said the texts speak for themselves. Buchanan denied seeing Trooper Proctor plant taillight fragments. He also explained why key witnesses were interviewed at the McCabe home, citing bad weather and emotional stress, raising defense concerns about witness separation. Finally, he confirmed Reed was interviewed at her parents' house with both parents in the room.
You testified that on direct examination that there was no video from Ring at or around the time 12:36 a.m. When Miss Reed's SUV returned back to One Meadows. Do you remember that testimony?
Yes.
Are you aware that after John O'Keefe's cell phone was recovered by Massachusetts State Police, someone at Massachusetts State Police actually opened the Ring app on his cell phone?
Yes.
Who is the person who opened and accessed the Ring app on John O'Keefe's cell phone?
I'm not 100% sure.
Sergeant, having looked at this report, does that refresh your recollection as to who may have accessed that Ring app?
Yes, that report is authored by Michael Proctor, and it says that investigators accessed the Ring application.
Trooper Proctor then, former Trooper Proctor, Michael Proctor, then responded, correct?
That's what it says here, yes.
And he responded to the group, "Funny, I'm going through his client's phone." He wrote, "No nudes so far," correct?
That's what it says, yes.
What did you think he was looking for when he wrote that phrase?
I don't know what he was looking for.
What would be a reasonable interpretation of what Michael Proctor was looking for when he wrote, "No nudes so far"?
I don't know.
Motorcycles, handbags, pair of shoes, or naked pictures of Miss Karen Reed?
His mission was to go through the phone to look for digital evidence that's related to the crime. The fact that he wrote "no nude so far," I cannot comment on.
Do you stand by your testimony that Michael Proctor conducted himself during the course of this investigation with integrity?
Yes, I do.
The fact is, Sergeant, you put it in writing and you liked it, correct?
I acknowledge the text message. I never saw the vile term.
And you'll also agree that this video was taken before any taillight material was ever found at 34 Fairview, correct?
I know that the SUV pulled into the garage, the Sally Port, at 5:35, and we were still on scene at 5:51, almost 52. So, yes, if that's timestamp before 5:51 before we left Canton PD, then yes, taillight pieces had already been found. At that point in time, after viewing Mr. O'Keefe's injuries, my impression shifted from him possibly being struck with the glass that was located at the scene where he was found to him being struck by a vehicle.
Why?
Due to the abrasions and cuts on his right arm, and the amount of force, in my experience, the amount of force one would have to generate to produce the wound to his head.
Had anybody in that home ever mentioned the idea of whether or not John O'Keefe went into 34 Fairview that night?
No.
Did you have any information whatsoever that there was any animus or animosity between Brian Higgins and John O'Keefe?
No.
Did you have any information that there was any animosity between Brian Albert and John O'Keefe?
No.
After a day off, Karen Reed returned to court on day 15, appearing upbeat, but the tone inside was serious. Prosecutors introduced new evidence suggesting John O'Keefe's death followed a volatile breakup. This came after the defense had Sergeant Buchanan read text messages between Reed and ATF agent Brian Higgins, which prosecutors say reveal a troubled relationship. O'Keefe's niece testified privately due to her age. Jurors also watched Reed's past interviews on Dateline and ID. Crime scene testimony resumed when Sergeant Brian Gallerani testified he collected DNA from Buchanan and Proctor, but not from several Canton officers, including the chief. Sergeant Evan Brent described evidence found buried in snow. Criminalist Maureen Hartnett detailed scratches, a dent, glass, and a hair found on the back of Reed's SUV.
And what was it that you were asked to document at that location?
Namely, it was Karen Reed's vehicle. I was also asked to process the front right passenger compartment of the vehicle for friction ridge impressions. A friction ridge impression is it's a replica or an impression of the friction ridge skin on the hands or the feet. What makes it unique and significant to policing is that that friction ridge skin has unique patterns. They're formed through ridges and furrows or hills and valleys, and they're unique to every individual. The area was processed with white fingerprint powder, examined, and no impressions of value were determined to be present. My recollection is that there was a significant amount of snow present. Snowbanks were apparent from what I presume to be plowing. There was an area that did appear to be cleared and heavily trodden by footwear and tires. Still, even in that area, there was a significant amount of snow with certain spots of grass showing.
Were you called out to 34 Fairview Road on February 18th of 2022 to photograph and document anything?
February 1st was the only date I was called to 34 Fairview, sir.
So the answer to my question is no, correct?
That's correct.
There was a search effort digging through some snowbanks that they were looking for some items. They wanted me to document it with photography. Some were on top of the snow, so there was some significant snow melt. I think that day it was raining out and it was much warmer than it was the previous 3 days. So some had been revealed by this melted snow, so they were on top. Others were under a foot and a half of snow.
What damage did you observe to that Chevy Traverse?
I observed no visible damage.
So you don't know, and you didn't know at the time, who had access to that Traverse during those 5 days, correct?
That is correct.
At the time, did you know you were at the home of a Boston police officer named Brian Albert?
I did not.
I was asked to examine a black Lexus SUV. I noticed there was some damage to the rear passenger area of the vehicle.
Did you take any swabs, to see if there was any biological evidence?
Yes, I did.
Where did you take swabs from as far as trace for blood?
I screened for blood on various areas of the undercarriage of the vehicle.
And what was the results?
Those were negative.
Was there anything significant that you saw relative to the back bumper of that vehicle?
Yes.
And share with us what you saw.
There were scratches on the bumper as well as apparent pieces of glass on the bumper.
Did you have any interest in maintaining that piece of evidence?
Yes, I did.
What did you want to do?
I wanted to collect the entire taillight housing.
Did you attempt to remove that entire unit yourself?
I did.
Were you successful?
No, I was not.
So what did you do?
A Canton police officer that was in the Sally Port at the time offered to help disconnect it with some tools that he had.
Day 16 brought key rulings, potential delays, and critical medical testimony. Karen Reed supporters won a major legal victory when Judge Cannoni lifted the protest buffer zone, following a federal court ruling it violated First Amendment rights. Meanwhile, Reed's defense may seek a delay after receiving a late forensic report from the Commonwealth. The report highlights a timing discrepancy between Reed's SUV and O'Keefe's phone that could disrupt the defense's timeline. The defense called it a mid-trial ambush. Prosecutors said they just received the data themselves. Now, criminalist Maureen Hartnett returned for cross-examination on evidence handling. Then came pivotal testimony from the medical examiner. She detailed O'Keefe's injuries and ruled the cause of death as blunt force trauma plus hypothermia, but left the manner of death undetermined. On cross, she admitted the injuries weren't clearly consistent with the car strike, and the head wound could have come from a fall.
When you say you looked over the entire vehicle, did you look over the back of the vehicle as well?
Yes, the only part I did not look at was the roof of the vehicle.
Did you find any dents, scratches, or hair anywhere but on other than the right side quarter of that Lexus?
I did not note any. I also did not examine the interior of the vehicle.
I did the autopsy on Mr. O'Keefe. I observed on his right upper eyelid a 1 centimeter laceration. So, I also observed abrasions on the anterior and the left aspect of the nose. There was some bleeding and some swelling of the eyelids of both eyes. So on the right upper medial arm, that would be the inner side of his arm, there was a superficial abrasion. Again, that's a scrape. Then on his right posterior arm and forearm, so not exactly on this aspect of the arm, but on the back side of the arm, which would be in the back of the diagram, there were multiple abrasions, which I described as ranging from 2 to 3 millimeters and up to 7 centimeters. I noted that there were 2 bruises on the back of his right hand, also a faint scratch on the back of his left hand. There was a small abrasion, a small scrape on the side of his right knee.
Do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to how those superficial abrasions occurred?
I do not.
Do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty how the other discoloration happened on Mr. O'Keefe's hand?
I can state to a reasonable degree of medical certainty that that's a bruise, a contusion, but I cannot tell you how it occurred.
Regarding the scrape on Mr. O'Keefe's right eye, can you provide an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty how that scrape occurred?
No, I cannot. When we pulled back the scalp, I noted that there was blood, what we call hemorrhage, under the laceration or associated with the laceration on the back of the right head. There were skull fractures associated with that laceration, abrasion on the right side of the head. So when the brain was removed and we were able to look at the base of the skull, I noted that there were multiple fractures that appeared to be originating from the area of the laceration, or what would correspond to the area of the laceration.
Inevitably, did you come to a conclusion about the manner and cause of Mr. O'Keefe's death?
In this case, stated that the cause was blunt impact injuries of head and hypothermia, and the manner was undetermined. There's nothing inconsistent with this injury, and a fall on someone's on the back of the head with a blunt surface.
Week 4 wrapped up with a short but fiery day 17 that almost led to a delay in proceedings. The prosecution leaned heavily on forensics, walking the jury through a detailed breakdown of DNA and physical evidence found at the scene and on John O'Keefe's clothing. First, a DNA expert from the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab testified that multiple bloodstains on O'Keefe's jeans, shirt, and sneakers were overwhelmingly likely to be his. But defense attorney David Yannetti pushed back, pointing out the DNA mixtures included unknown contributors, and that the lab never compared samples to other key names like Brian Albert or Brian Higgins. Then came a second expert, a physical match analyst who reconstructed shattered taillight pieces found on Fairview Road. Some fragments were matched as part of a single taillight unit, presumably from Karen Reed's Lexus, but others showed no mechanical connection. Finally, a courtroom fight erupted over expert data. The defense accused the Commonwealth of trying to get, quote, 3 bites at the apple by updating a tech expert's report about vehicle and phone data after the defense had already cross-examined witnesses. The judge ultimately ruled the state could move forward, setting the stage for a high-stakes rebuttal.
So the DNA profile was interpreted as a mixture of 3 contributors, including male DNA. And the DNA profile from this item is at least 510 non-alien times more likely if it originated from John O'Keefe and 2 unknown individuals. The DNA profile was interpreted as a mixture of 3 contributors, including male DNA. The DNA profile from this item is at least 530 non-alien times more likely if it originated from John O'Keefe and 2 unknown individuals.
What did you conclude based on the generation of those profiles with those 4 items?
Yeah, so the profiles that were generated were not suitable for comparison. It was a mixture of at least 5 contributors. We can only interpret mixtures of up to 4 contributors. So I determined that there were 5 contributors, so that makes it too complex for us to do comparisons to it.
Were you ever asked to compare DNA samples from either Canton Police Detective Kevin Albert or Canton Police Chief Kenneth Berkowitz to the DNA profile that you analyzed from that passenger side taillight?
I was not.
Were you ever asked to compare the DNA profile with the DNA profiles of either Brian Higgins or Brian Albert?
I was not.
What did you conclude as far as your physical match analysis within that item alone?
Within item 3-1, I believe 4 of the pieces fit together.
Now, if I could turn your attention to item 7-5, piece of plastic red recovered from 34 Fairview Road. What did you conclude as far as your physical match analysis just within that single item?
There was no physical match noted among those 3 pieces of apparent plastic.
And when you say no physical match found from the different pieces within that item, what does that mean?
The broken edges of each piece did not align.
And what, if any, conclusions did you come to in relation to your physical match analysis between item 715 and item 716?
2 pieces from item 7-15, F and H, fit mechanically with 2 pieces from item 7-16, F and G. So 2 pieces from item 7-8, pieces C and D, 1 piece from item 7-9, piece A, and 1 piece from 7-16, piece E were found to have a mechanical fit. So those pieces were at one time together as a larger unit.
And what, if any, conclusions did you come to from your analysis, your physical match analysis between item 3-1 and all of the items beginning with the number 7?
There was a physical match with, do you want me to list?
If you
all
could,
of them?
please.
Okay. So 2 pieces from item 7-5, 4 pieces from item 7-8, 1 piece from item 7-10, 4 pieces from item 7-11, 2 pieces from item 7-12, 2 pieces from item 7-13, 4 pieces from item 7-15, and 4 pieces from item 7-16 were found to fit mechanically with item 3-1.
So what's depicted here is the mechanical fit between items 7-5, 7-6, 7-8, 7-10, 7-11, 7-12, 7-13, 7-14, 7-15, and 7-16, correct?
Not items 7-8 and 7-14, but the other ones, yes.
From clashing forensic timelines to newly surfaced text messages, week 4 brought a wave of testimony that cut straight to the heart of the case. With credibility, timing, and motive all now under the microscope, the next phase of this retrial promises even more twists and turns. I'm Cody Thomas, and as always, thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay informed, and we'll see you next time we go back on the record.